Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the City of Farmers Branch study session. The time is 3:01. The date is March the 16th, 2021. I'll make a few brief comments here. Mayor Dye has been called out on another commitment. He'll be back in about 30 minutes. So we're going to go ahead and begin the study session. Councilman Baumgartner is also out. He's in the hospital. And so we hope that stays brief and our prayers and thoughts go out to him. We have two council members online, and we do have a quorum because of the changes to the Open Meetings Act. So I think with that, we will start with item A1, discuss regular agenda items. And I'll start with our online attendees, Ms. Ratana.
Nothing for me, sir.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Driscoll.
Nothing for me right now, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Lynn.
I noticed on item I1, which was regarding study session comments from the last meeting, my comments were not noted on that, and so what I'll do is I'm going to repeat them all today in A5.
Oh, okay. So the future agenda items that you had presented last meeting were not captured. Is that correct? Correct. Okay, great. Well, and I understand. Thank you for that. Any other changes, revisions, questions? Okay, I also have no questions or changes or questions. And with that, we will go to item A2. A2, receive a presentation and discussion related to the North Central Texas Council of Governments Irving to Frisco Passenger Rail Corridor Study. Ms. Fergus.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And we are having Brendan Wheeler with the North Central Texas Council of Governments connecting here. So I see he's getting his presentation. So just a quick recap. Again, Brendan Wheeler, the Senior Transportation Planner with the North Central Texas Council of Governments, is with us via Zoom to provide the council with an informative presentation related to the Irving to Frisco Passenger Rail Corridor Study and how this relates to Farmers Branch. Mr. Shane Davis, our Director of Sustainability and Public Health, as well as myself, have been participating on the Project Advisory Committee for the corridor study, and we believe it to be beneficial for council to receive an update related to the study since this rail corridor traverses through Farmers Branch. Much like our recently adopted I-35 corridor vision study, which was a long-range planning study with a long-term planning horizon, this Irving to Frisco corridor study is also a long-range planning effort in order to evaluate the opportunity for commuter passenger rail service along this rail corridor. So I will turn the presentation over to Brendan, and all of us will be glad to answer any questions that council may have after the presentation. So thank you. Brendan, it's all yours.
Thank you, Tina. And good afternoon, Council. I just have a few short slides to share with you on our study that COG is leading. If y'all have any questions, feel free to ask them as we go, or we'll have some time at the end for any questions. So as Tina mentioned, we started this study here just under a year ago. And for today, I just want to walk y'all through the purpose of our study, the attractions to jobs in Farmers Branch that we noticed through our travel modeling efforts, the interesting proximity of the Farmers Branch area to the downtown Carrollton hub as a part of our regional rail planning efforts, and some benefits of this Valley View station location. So jumping right in with the study purpose, this really builds off of the effort back in 2010 that COG led for a conceptual engineering and funding study along this Irving to Frisco corridor. And you can see a map there off to your right, and it stretches from a southwest to a north-northeast direction, crossing several existing and planned rail lines. What I'd like to mention, part of our purpose is to really prepare a alternatives analysis to determine transit demand along this corridor. So we're not determining all the ways that how this is going to be built, or all the hoops we need to jump through to make this corridor a reality. Our current effort is really just focused on transit demand Where should we put the stations? What makes sense from a city planning standpoint? What makes sense from a redevelopment or a development potential along the corridor for a station location, and corresponding land uses, et cetera. Another aspect of this study is to determine the northern limits of this corridor. Along the south there, you can see downtown Irving. That's where the corridor, there's a Y junction with the TRE line that you're all familiar with. The 2010 effort stopped the corridor in North Frisco along Rock Hill Parkway, just north of Panther Creek Parkway. And what we wanted to do was refresh that study and take a look at the growing communities of Prosper and Salina, since those have been expanding quite rapidly, especially in the last decade or more. And as part of our effort, we're coordinating with the ongoing Collin County Transit Planning Study, which is a partnership effort with this corridor. Part of the corridor is in Collin County, and the timing of both the transit study in Collin County and a couple other counties that COG is leading was just conducive to partnering both efforts together as we look at transit possibilities for these areas. Now, some topics excluded from our study, we're not looking at rail infrastructure needs. We're not looking at the supply side. What's the track requirements? Do we need to double track, triple track? Are we grade separating over this or that arterial? We're really just, like I mentioned, looking at transit demand. As many of you know, this is an active freight corridor. BNSF operates freight along this corridor. And we're doing our transit study in conjunction with BNSF, but we're not looking at freight demand yet. Again, that'll be a follow-on effort where we combine both transit demand and freight demand and see where the supply side, the infrastructure, the number of tracks, where all that nexus needs to happen, so that then we can start looking at how we fund this and how we start building this, whether in phases or all at once. Just some simple facts for the corridor. This is a 38-mile corridor. We're looking at regional rail. We're not looking at light rail. It'd be more similar to the A-train technology or what DART's putting on the Silver Line. And at this point, we've identified 12 stations along the corridor that we believe should move forward into the next phase of the study. Valley View, obviously, being one of them. And you can notice its proximity there to downtown Carrollton, just about 2 miles apart. So with that, let's step into the attraction to jobs. We noticed that during our ridership modeling effort using COG's regional travel demand model, Valley View really attracts more trips than it produces. In other words, there's more people coming into Farmers Branch for jobs than there are leaving Farmers Branch to go out to other communities, at least through our, as I mentioned, our modeling efforts, those that would be using this rail line. And it performs well given its proximity to downtown Carrollton. What's interesting is it's almost a 50-50 split. It's a 60-40 split from people attracted to Farmers Branch from the north, as well as those attracted to Farmers Branch from the south. Even though Valley View Lane is at the bottom third, the lower third of this corridor, you still have a significant number of people coming from downtown Irving and really the TRE line connection, which would likely, you'd likely assume they'd be coming from Fort Worth or other areas along the TRE line to come to Farmers Branch. Downtown Carrollton is also a heavy contributor to the Valley View station. And I believe that's likely due to the rail connections in downtown Carrollton, where future A-train will have a stop there. The Silver Line, once it's completed, will have a stop there, and obviously the Green Line has a stop there today. So speaking of downtown Carrollton, we noticed that through our study, we've recognized this is a major hub for the DFW region. There's not really any other place in DFW where you have 3 rail lines that converge at one point like they do here in downtown Carrollton. As such, it's somewhat of a unique nexus. As I mentioned, you have the A-train that will eventually have a stop there. They're planning to extend their rail line from where it stops today down to downtown Carrollton. You have the Green Line has a stop there today. Silver Line crosses through there and will be constructed here in the next couple of years and have a stop there. And in this corridor that we're looking at, the Irving-Frisco corridor, would have a stop there as well. And what's really interesting about this station is you have a lot of boarding and lighting, a lot of people getting on and off at that station, but most of the activity is from transfers, from say, the Silver Line going to the Irving to Frisco line, maybe someone coming from Fort Worth going up to Frisco, or someone coming from Denton going over to Plano, or many other directions that you can take from these different options. The activity at this station is comparable with some of the larger transit stations we have in the region. Union Station in Dallas, Fort Worth Central Station, Parker Road has a lot of activity with all those people driving in from Allen and McKinney to go into Richardson and Dallas work centers. So downtown Carrollton is a pretty significant part of our regional rail network, and Valley View Lane just south of there benefits from that connection. It benefits from the access to Denton, Frisco, Plano, and other areas along those lines. So a portion of our study focuses on land use around the stations. What are the best practices to develop or redevelop for transit-oriented development? What fosters a symbiotic relationship between the station and surrounding land uses? So looking at land uses, the current land uses in the area, as y'all are well aware, are commercial, industrial, and warehouses, which the zoning supports. From an existing transit first last mile standpoint, DART currently operates a couple of bus routes. They're looking at making some changes in the DART network, as many of you are well aware, and possibly moving to a GoLink service in this area to serve first last mile needs. This Valley View station provides really strong east-west connectivity, given the layout of Valley View Lane. And the reason I mention that is early on in our process, what was recommended in 2010 was a station in Farmers Branch at Mercer Parkway, just a little bit south of this location. However, when we found out that the city doesn't really have plans to connect Mercer Parkway across the rail line, it doesn't have really strong east-west connectivity like Valley View Lane, we found that this was a much more apt location for a station. So finally, we've found that through our study efforts, the city staff approached us with current efforts on the I-35E vision study, as you all know, and how these two efforts might benefit from each other. This parallel study effort is highly supportive of a Valley View station location. The two stations, the station on the Green Line in downtown Farmers Branch, the Valley View station are only about half a mile, just over half a mile apart, very close together, and as such, they kind of feed off of each other and allowing passengers from both corridors to access the transit-oriented development at each station location. And from that standpoint, you're able to have a much larger footprint of redevelopment opportunity, pedestrian, walking type environment. So with that, all on the presentation there, and taking any questions y'all may have. That was just a quick overview of all the work we've done so far. Here's our contact information for the project team, both the COG team and our prime consultant, HDR, is helping us with this. So if y'all have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Wheeler. I'll open it up to questions, beginning with Mr. Driscoll.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Wheeler. This is a very interesting study. Do you have a time frame for when you will, complete your analysis, and kind of a progressive time frame when this might be built out if everything goes according to the ideal planning?
Yes, sir. Well, we don't have a firm time frame on when this might actually be built. This current study, as I mentioned, is just a part of the process, and we're planning to complete this effort here in the next couple of months. So by the end of spring, early summer, we'll plan to wrap up our study efforts and kind of hand it off to the next phase. We haven't identified funding for when the next phase may happen, but we've got wheels in motion. As far as when something like this might be constructed, it's a lot of it depends on when the funding comes in and where we identify funding and all those things. So this corridor is on our Mobility 2045 plan for the Council of Governments, but we don't expect anything to be constructed for a good period of time, I'll say that. So it could be anywhere from 15 to 20 years out, and again, very highly contingent on when and where funding is identified.
Right. And I guess your analysis and projections will take into account predictions of future population growth as well as, say, energy costs, because again, it's a trade-off between driving and taking, you know, light rail or regional rail.
That's right. Our COGS travel demand model does take into account COGS demographic forecast for 2045. 2018 population estimates for the Metroplex are in the 7.5 million range, and 2045 is in the 11.5 million range. So those estimates and travel patterns are taken into account in this analysis. In fact, all the modeling we did was for 2045.
Thank you. I would be very interested in getting on your email list and following up with this and continuing the discussion. I find this very interesting.
Absolutely. Happy to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lynn?
I just have one question, and that is, looking ahead, do you plan on asking your member cities for an increase in what they contribute in order to build this system?
That's a great question. We haven't identified the path forward on funding yet. I don't believe it is in anyone's intent to request DART member cities to increase funding for these services. That question goes for your community as well as the city of Irving and Carrollton and even Plano along this line. So those are some of the discussions we're having, and we're trying to start with this effort of how do we move something like this forward with so many communities that are already paid into a DART system and already are paying their fair share for the transit they're receiving. How can we move something like this forward? So I can't answer that directly, but I will say that's something we're discussing, and that's not really the direction we're intending to move, if I can say it that way.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Furtado?
Thank you so much. Just one quick question. I know, Tina, you mentioned that you all have been a part of the conversations. Brendan, in having those conversations and having this focus group, if you will, is it just municipalities, or are you kind of presenting this to also, you know, major corporations along those lines to assist in potentially funding efforts or just support efforts to ensure that this is successful?
Thank you. Yeah, currently it's our project advisory team is comprised of cities along the route, counties, the 3 counties that we're in, as well as DCTA, DART, and the BNSF, since they're along the line. Those are really the major advisory committee members that we have as a part of our group. We haven't strictly engaged corporations along the route yet. But I believe that in follow-on efforts, that would be a very advantageous thing to do, as you mentioned, to get a better whole picture of how it might be funded and how it might benefit others.
Thank you. And follow up to that, in your opinion and in your, in the work that you do, have you ever seen for projects like this where, municipalities may be working on economic development projects along these types of corridors? Have members from your team kind of participated in those conversations just to kind of keep everybody updated or in some type of advisory capacity in the past?
We've been involved with the development along, say, the TexRail project, as well as conversations on the Silver Line project. And I'm sorry, I may have missed the purpose of the question. Was it related to?
Just for context purposes, just as I'm thinking of kind of our economic development projects along our own corridor and even around that station, I know that you're having conversations with our staff because they're a part of that advisory board, but on the flip side, maybe having someone on our advisory board, something to think about, Tina. I'm not sure if it would be a good fit, but just to ensure that those task force members kind of know what's going on, but then also work collectively with our development team to kind of figure out, based on their experience of what's been working around these corridors, especially since it's going to be a bigger project. Now knowing that this is also going on, that will create more opportunities for us. Maybe a good idea to not just have us sit on their advisory board, but then also having someone from their side sitting on our task force for the Mustang Station development. Just a thought. That's why I was curious, Brandon, if y'all have done that in the past. So more of a comment, if you will. But thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. That's a good comment.
Good. I wanted to follow up on Councilmember Lynn's question about the funding. Since Frisco, Prosper, and Salina are all on this route, do you have any insight or information on how those cities might be brought into the DART network as far as from a funding perspective? Since at least in Frisco's case, I believe that they turned down membership early on, and so there's been a funding cycle. Like Farmers Branch has been a member for over 30 years, and other member cities have not helped pay the freight, so to speak. So do you have any insight on that?
Well, I do know that it's somewhat of a political hot potato in Collin County, which is frankly why we started the Collin County Transit Study, was to answer some of those questions and provide a little more latitude for cities that were interested in transit but didn't like the maybe a one-size-fits-all of it has to look this way approach to join a transit agency. Or even weren't able to based on some decisions they'd made in the past, given 4A, 4B tax, and those kind of things. But what we're trying to do as a part of this study is start the conversation where we actually pull back and broaden the perspective of even just using this Irving to Frisco rail corridor as an example. DART could be the implementing agency, and as such, they'd have their protocols to follow and their members that they need to work with to make sure there's equity among all members. It could be DCTA, though that's a similar process, and they'd have to work out with DART member cities how that looks. There's another option on the table, though, that since BNSF is active in the corridor and plans to remain active in the corridor, in fact, I believe they're even ramping up planning for additional freight traffic, they actually operate passenger rail in other parts of the country. Mm-hmm. So there's the opportunity where maybe it's neither DART nor DCTA, but it's BNSF that actually operates. And so from that standpoint, depending on who the operator is, may change how funding is addressed. Mm-hmm. So we're looking at ways where the legislature can open up possibilities for cities to pay for transit in a different way than being completely constrained to the small amount of sales tax the city is able to offer toward transit or economic development, whichever one they choose, or the various items that cities feel they need to pay for. Additionally, we're looking at other items beyond just sales tax. So we're trying to pull back and address the problem from a varied approach to see what ways we can move transit forward without and recognizing the equity of those cities, such as Farmers Branch, that have been a part of DART and have been paying in for so long, and not minimizing that fact at all. So it's kind of a balance, and like I said, we're just at the beginning of this process, so we don't really have answers. It's more of just trying to step back and broaden the approach we're taking.
Yeah, well, I appreciate your comments, and don't take my comments to mean that I would be opposed to bringing in new cities. I'm certainly not, but the funding is definitely something that needs to be addressed. And I think even from the perspective of member cities that have been a member of a long time, is there a better mechanism for funding as opposed to the 1 cent?
Sure.
So there's no further questions, then I really appreciate you being here and giving us this update. We look forward to future updates, and hopefully this project can come to fruition sometime in the future. So thank you, Mr. Wheeler. Appreciate it.
Great. Thank y'all for letting me present.
Item A2, presentation and discussion that's not item A2. We're on item A3, and we're going to talk about the review and discuss the FY22 critical business outcomes. Mr. Williams.
Mayor and Council, Ben Williamson, Assistant City Manager, to discuss the FY22 critical business outcomes. It's a brief presentation, but it's very impactful for the overall process, especially the budget process, which starts early in the calendar year, to where staff looks for direction for council on what is our strategic alignment, and then we create initiatives that align to council's direction and get us to the budget you will see. As a reminder, a critical business outcome is a short-term, 1 to 3 year priority. There it goes. All right. One of the themes we've always talked about is starting with why, and this really highlights the relationship between the council and the staff in this process. The why is kind of what are we trying to accomplish, and why are we trying to accomplish it? The how and the what, the how area starts to blend council and staff together, and then what we do is the staff taking that policy direction and turning it into execution. The current strategic plan is in full swing. You see quarterly updates from your city manager's update and report every quarter, and we highlight different strategic initiatives for the year to share those. And again, just kind of circling back to the why of this process and how it's interconnected to the council. The way this process goes is we review what we're doing in 2021. So the current fiscal year, it's still early in this fiscal year, but the progress that's being made. And so we bring up these at the strategic planning session, which we had earlier in January, and discuss what progress is being made, anticipated progress, overall health of these outcomes. And the basic setting and the basic feedback so far is that the majority of these are still healthy considerations to keep moving forward from year to year. So we're not needing necessarily to modify them, remove them, or necessarily even declare them successful yet, but we're making progress with these critical business outcomes. So on the strategic plan one, there was some discussion about the proper alignment to the comprehensive plan component of it. And some of the feedback was, who are these plans targeting? Are they currently up to date with the growth we've experienced recently? Our population has changed. Who are the customers? Are we serving external? Are we serving internal? And some of the mission, vision, and values, which our vision statement is relatively new. And so making sure check some of these plans that are a little bit older and make sure there's proper alignment to where we're currently at as a city and where we're planning to go. Responsible and diverse housing. Seems like the theme there was to modify it to access instead of improve options for responsible and diverse housing to provide access to housing. So greater term, a little bit more flexibility in what we're trying to do. The next four all seem to be continued in their current form was the feedback I generally had, which is managing drainage and retention. That's a long-term goal. We're making a lot of progress, but would we say we're complete at this end of this fiscal year? Most likely no. It's a continued priority for the city to continue to focus on that. High-quality public assets. We have a lot of major projects underway right now, but those projects will most likely continue for years to come. And so again, the theme was keep going in that direction. We like the direction, but keep making progress. Support the evolution of the arts and culture in Farmers Branch. Our Public Art and Culture Committee is relatively new, but it's making progress. Could you argue, is it getting into a rhythm? Absolutely, but does it continue to be a focus? That seemed to be the theme. There wasn't an overwhelming, let's go ahead and remove this. We've found success. It's still continuing. How do we fund it? What's our policy? What's our philosophy? And we're still growing in that area. Strategically identify and acquire property to further the goals of the city. Absolutely, we've made progress in that area, and we still have goals there, so it continued to stay as well. Is there still more property we'd like to acquire? And then what do we do with that property? And that's a continuation of that conversation. And execute sustainability initiatives. Continued, but you could consider might be complete in FY21 as we've hired a sustainability manager. We're bringing back the consideration of bringing back the sustainability committee at the next meeting. So we're starting to get into that rhythm. We've installed the solar panels, solar considerations, other sustainability considerations moving forward. So we have that part of our conversation. So that was the current critical business outcomes that we were focused on. Putting everything together, start to add the previous list, but what do we do with the current list to make it look for next year. A lot of words here, but the general theme on a critical business outcome is under 10 is generally considered healthy. Otherwise, we're getting a very broad scope of work. Two new ones on this one that were discussed was, we know we have the I-35 corridor study to implement some of those outcomes, not just do the study, but let's go ahead and implement and execute some of those recommendations. And improve overall and targeted community engagement. So those would be two that would be added to the list. So the current 7 continue to stay, modified a little bit from their current form, basic intent stays. And then we would add those other ones. And the community engagement one is one we're currently discussing as well. What could that be? And some of the hows, it could be a 311 app. We're currently working on updating the resident satisfaction survey, and then website updates. Our website's due for a major refresh, and so it's considering how do we use these tools instead of just pushing information out to turn them into a conversation with our residents, kind of morphing to that model, and how do we bring feedback in instead of just pushing out, because we do a great job of pushing information out. So council, the next slide moves us to discussion. What we're looking for as staff is, do you like the direction, the way we've phrased the critical business outcomes as we prepare discussions by staff to start working on the budget to find solutions that are tied to the budget that execute the direction of council? Turn it over to council.
Thank you much for that presentation. I'll go ahead and open it up to council, and I believe that Mr. Lynn's up. You, sorry.
So, Ben, I have a question. You know, these CBOs were put together by council working with staff, and you know, as we continue to sort of fine tune each year what we're doing, is there ever an opportunity for citizens to weigh in on this and have like a town hall to review with citizens exactly what we're working on?
Absolutely, and previously one of the ways we did that was with Farmers Branch Night Out, which typically occurred around this time pre-COVID, where we would bring all the initiatives out to the different pods we would have at different locations to discuss. And in this instance, a lot of time we're relying on council and your sensing of the public. What are the goals of the public and what would they like to see? And there's always just feedback on the plan itself as we go through these discussions, because it always does happen in an open forum. So if there's any engagement from the public in that consideration as well. So we always do ask for feedback on it, but typically we would use that Farmers Branch Night Out mechanism, which we're going to try and have a little bit later in this calendar year to bring that back to discuss, because there's a lot of projects going on in the city. So it's a great way to talk about what's going on and what we're leaning towards. But we could do more, absolutely, if you're seeking more input from the public on the strategic plan.
Ms. Rattano. Cristal.
Thank you, Ben. No questions really, just comments. Very excited to get to work with my here to kind of move the needle on some of these things. So specifically around the targeted community engagement, you know, that's something that I've really been trying to work on for my area as well. And I know that, you know, one of the things that we've been talking about for a while is just this app, this more of kind of interactive app where our constituents can really use to get information, but also to give us information as well. So I know that's something that I know is being spearheaded by our IT team. So just really excited about it. Great work, Ben, and look forward to continuing the conversation around these CBOs.
Thank you. I also don't have too much to add to this. I do appreciate your work on putting this together. I think if I look back over the 6 years of doing this, that it's really made a lot of progress, and now we're at a state where we really do make progress on these initiatives year to year. And we, as the latest city manager's quarterly report showed, we can track the individual metrics very closely. And so I appreciate your work on this. And I think that this will serve as a good basis to keep moving Farmers Branch forward. So thanks, Ben.
Absolutely, thank you.
Mayor Dyer.
Next item?
You're on the next to have comments if you want.
No comments at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And I'm going to turn the meeting back to Mayor Dyer.
All right. Did Mr. Driscoll get to speak?
I thought he did. Didn't I get to you, Michael?
No, not yet.
Okay, well, I guess maybe I just had a brain cramp, you know?
Councilmember Driscoll, you can go ahead if you have any comments to this.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank you also, Ben, and I know this is a comprehensive effort on the part of many different departments with the city staff, and I think I'd just like to commend you all on it. We discussed this, of course, at the one-day offsite we had in January. I'm fully on board with these CBOs, and I particularly look forward to seeing how we can move toward target number 2, improving access to responsible and diverse housing. I think it's critical for modern cities as they grow and develop to offer a variety of housing options for citizens, current and those moving in. And I also like the addition of number 8 and number 9, and fully endorse those. And so look forward to, as has already been said, us getting after these, and the city's growing. We've got a lot of exciting things, and I think these are important initiatives to position us well in the Metroplex to continue to be a city of choice. And just want to say thanks and full speed ahead.
Does anyone else have any additional comments? No? Ben, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for your support. Staff will work to tie this to the budget and bring something exciting forward in the next couple months. Thank you.
Thanks. Next is A4, discuss mask requirements at city facilities and take appropriate action. Want to go in? Okay. So in review of the recent kind of branch bulletin that went out that, in my opinion, completely relaxed the kind of mask protocol in our city facilities, I just wanted to have a discussion amongst council on what we thought was the best course of action. I personally believe that we should take this quarter by quarter and see how things are kind of progressing as we roll out more of the vaccines. I know that we have a lot of residents that would not feel comfortable coming to our facilities and seeking services if, the mask mandate is fully lifted in our facilities. And we have a bunch of residents that feel the other way, that they want it completely lifted and want to get back to life. But seeing that there's probably some different opinions from council members, I at least wanted this to be a discussion for all of us to decide what we do going forward so that it is the consensus of council. And because we're the ones that probably going to have to answer all this, but I do take into consideration that staff has to implement this and listen to a lot of it, so there is some consideration there. But with that, I just want to open up that discussion. My opinion would be to continue it for another quarter through the end of June and reevaluate it then to see what we do in July going forward. But Councilmember Norwood.
Well, as you said, there's, it's pretty much split 50-50, I would say. But, the governor's relaxation of the mandate had some effect, but, if you go out to restaurants, and as I do, and you'll notice that most restaurants are asking, people to continue wearing masks. In fact, I went to Home Depot the other day and it said masks still required. So I think that, a broader spectrum of the community is still wanting to retain the mask mandate. And I think it's probably prudent for Farmers Branch to do the same. I don't know that we have much recourse from a punitive standpoint, and I don't know that we want to take punitive action. I think that, Farmers Branch is a city built on good neighbors. And so I think that the policy that we have, which I thought was on the board out here that says masks still recommended, is sufficient, and if there's a one or two that, don't comply, I think that, that's going to happen. But for the majority of the citizens of this city, I think they will comply because they're cognizant and concerned for their neighbors. So I think we leave it, like you said, in place for a while, and we monitor it month by month and see where it is. If it really becomes apparent that herd immunity is taking place, then I think we ought to get rid of them. But right now, I don't believe that is the case, and so I support your position on this.
Okay. Councilmember Lynn.
Well, I'm going to always advocate for safety first, but some questions have come up most recently, especially with the reopening of the branch connection. And there are some folks who are a little miffed at where we are today. Question comes up as to how we handle those who cannot get a vaccine for a medical reason, or simply have not been able to get one because they've just been on a list waiting forever, or for religious reasons. And I think those factors need to be considered. So the Branch Connection opened up this week, and if you don't have at least your first shot in 14 days past that, then you're going to be denied admission. And there are some residents who feel strongly about this, and I frankly didn't know what to tell them. They asked who made the policy. I said the mayor in conjunction with city staff. And so I left it at that, but even as this meeting started, a question came. Somebody texted in, hey, I have a question about mandatory vaccine requirement at the Branch Connection. Is that temporary or ongoing? If temporary, what is the duration? How did that decision come about and why? So there have been several of these that have come across my email and text. I haven't had the shots yet, so I haven't been in the building. I know the Branch Connection is continuing to distribute their food giveaway with the drive-through, and I think the plan is to offer both in-person pickup as well as drive-through pickup starting in April, if I'm not mistaken. That's what Jackie had told me. Okay, either way. But I know folks our seniors and our active adults are desperately clamoring to get back in the building, and there are those who haven't been able to get shots or have flat out said they're not getting it. And if they choose not to get a shot, does that mean they're going to be banned from the building until such time as we deem it safe to not have a vaccine? So I need to hear that from somebody.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a question there, and let's hear what everybody else has to say, and then we can address it.
Okay. Councilmember Ratana.
Thank you, Mayor. I would say that, coming from the healthcare field, I will be a little more conservative when it comes to the mask requirement, just because, we've seen what COVID has done in our community. And I echo, Mayor, your sentiments in the fact that we don't know what's going to happen with the vaccine, but we are far, far away from herd immunity. And although, on one side, we don't want to disenfranchise folks from being able to come in the building that don't want to wear a mask, but at the same time, we're also disenfranchising those folks that want to be able to have the opportunity to use our services, but may not do so due to the fact that they may encounter somebody that may not be wearing a mask because it's not required in our facilities. With the order, my understanding is that we do have the authority to require, much like a restaurant does, which, to your point, Councilmember Norwood, I haven't seen a restaurant that does not requiring it in our community. And so, but I may be mistaken. So those are my sentiments. I understand that it puts staff in a very difficult situation, and I definitely I'm a bit conflicted with that, just because of the fact that I would hate to put our staff in jeopardy, but at the same time, we've been wearing masks for a while now, so I don't want to, this to deter our constituents to be able to access services because of the fact that they may be fearful. Because let's be honest, most of our population isn't eligible for the vaccine yet, and so again, coming from that perspective, the healthcare perspective, we are far away from herd immunity. But I do feel like we're getting closer and closer day by day as we get more vaccines in. And our national administration advised that they're wanting to make sure that every American has access by the end of May. So hopefully by the end of Q2, we'll be able to make a a different decision and go maybe be a little more lenient with the masks. But until that happens, I'm very much in favor of keeping the requirement in our city facilities to ensure everybody has equitable access to the resources that they pay for. So those are my comments, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Driscoll.
Yes, yeah, as has been stated, this is something we've been dealing with for, basically a year. We can argue the pros and cons from a public policy point of view and people's rights and freedoms, and I hear from constituents and have heard, and I know I will, that they're happy facilities are opening up, and some places a mask may be optional. I tend to err on the side of the epidemiologists and the medical specialists. This is a virus, and we already know there are at least 3 or 4 new variants. And the latest things I've read, they are widespread across the country. So I try to think about what the medical experts and the epidemiologists, who are not just reacting to what's happened in the last year, but this has been their field of study for their lifetime. And most of them are erring on the side of caution and saying that we're likely to see, waves as these new variants go through different states and different municipalities. So I would hate for us to kind of loosen controls prematurely and down the road then be accused of, well, City of Farmers Branch had an event and it turned into a mass spreader event and we've got all these people sick and dying. And I don't enjoy wearing a mask. I don't enjoy the isolation, but I try to follow the medical advice. And I think a appropriate, a prudent way to approach this is sift the data, see where we are. I read this morning on a couple of the websites, I think roughly about 10% of the population in Texas has been vaccinated. Well, to me, that means there's 90% who haven't. And as we all know, a lot of people are asymptomatic. They don't know they have it, and they don't know they're bringing it home or whatever. So I would tend to err on the side of caution. And I like the suggestion that's been floated that we stick with requiring them in city facilities and then review it a couple of months down the road. And as I've heard from constituents who are happy and doing high fives to get back in the branch connection, and I applaud that. I've heard from others who say, well, if it's going to be optional, what's wrong with you, City Council? Are you crazy? I'm not going to go anywhere if I'm going to encounter people not wearing one. So there's not an easy answer for us, but I think we need to be prudent going forward.
Thank you. Charles, do you want to, provide an answer to Mr. Lynn's questions?
Yeah. Well, first let me mention that, setting rules for city facilities and for public events is a complicated endeavor. We were one of the leaders when the pandemic started. We were one of the leaders in managing our facilities and our events. We were one of the first to actually have a mask requirement in city facilities. We were one of the first to close down some of the facilities and also one of the first to open the facilities. We are the only city in this area, if not a good portion of the country, that has endeavored to start opening a senior facility, the Branch Connection. I will tell you that trying to manage in the pandemic and do so safely, I think we have a really good track record so far. We've had a number of events, and we've had a number of facilities that have been opened, and to my knowledge, we've not had a super spreader event or situation. It's a balance trying to protect the health and safety of residents versus employees. I think we have a good track record on doing both. I will tell you that the governor's order, the GA 34 that went out March the 2nd, when he talked about Texas is now open, it did provide an exception and exclusion for cities so that cities could manage their own facilities kind of the way we have been. It still says, hey, a city cannot regulate what a private business can do, but a city is allowed to manage their own facilities. Unfortunately, the enforcement parameters make it a little bit complicated, and that was one of the reasons that we, in talking to our two chiefs and talking to every department head, we realized fairly quickly after the governor's order went out that to the practicality of maintaining that requirement would be difficult. And that's why we went to recommended for all facilities. And quite frankly, if you walk around the city facilities, which I have been doing, 99.9% of the facilities, people still choose to wear a mask. But the enforcement mechanism that we have right now, if we went back to a requirement, the enforcement mechanism would be for us to, obviously politely ask the individual to wear a mask. If they refuse, in both the rec center as well as the library, already there have been people that have been quite belligerent in terms of wearing a mask and indicated that they're willing to be arrested if need be. And so the only avenue we have for us is for an employee of either facility to file a criminal trespass charge against that resident, and then the police would come and arrest the resident. That's not an easy thing. That's not a thing that we would take lightly. And it's not like the city of Farmers Branch versus John Doe. It would be the employee who would have to individually file that criminal trespass. That's quite confrontational, believe me. Yes, we could refuse service. That's an option. But that in itself is confrontational. And in a quiet place like the library, when you have somebody that's upset and they start screaming and yelling, even if you turn your back to them, it's still rather unsettling. We tried to, in terms of the policy we currently have in place, where it's recommended, we felt that was the best avenue we had with the cards that we have dealt us. We also looked to what other cities are doing. Coppell has moved to a recommended as opposed to required. Carrollton has moved to recommended as opposed to required. Addison says they're required, but I do want to point out that Addison has never reopened. Their city, other than their recreation center or their athletic club, they have not reopened city facilities. They've been closed the entire year. And so that I take their requirement lightly when they're physically closed. In terms of keeping residents safe that are concerned about, hey, it's recommended, I'm concerned about going to a city facility, we've always, from day one, provided virtual services, drive-through services. People can call. We've tried to provide a wide variety and gamut of options for folks that felt unsafe coming into city facilities. I've mentioned, in terms of the branch connection, I've had folks, actually, I've had some of the seniors express concern that we're not strict enough with the current measures, that instead of one vaccine, we should wait till the second vaccine. And I think there's a false sense of security, whether you're vaccinated or you have masks, that you are 100% immune from the COVID virus. That's you are not. And so what I advise folks is if they are really, really concerned about getting sick, that they should, coming to a city facility in a social setting is not the place to be. So I just want to make sure people know that whether you have masks or don't, vaccinated or not, that does not mean you're not. Nothing is 100%. On the branch connection, we wanted to be the leader in terms of being able to open a senior facility. However, that particular population is most at risk of not just getting sick, but of dying. And so that's why the determination was made, how could we, at what point do the odds get really in the favor of a senior not dying? And in looking at multiple studies, after you have that first vaccination, plus 2 weeks, get your temperature taken, wear a mask, the likelihood of getting the disease goes, it gets to be in the, you're roughly in the 80% protection after that first, after the first vaccine, but you're 100% able to avoid a complex diagnosis, meaning hospitalization or death. And so at that point, we felt that the odds were in such a good, in a good way for the seniors that we felt comfortable opening it. You know, the senior board and the boards, by the way, have all reviewed these policies that are in place. The senior board felt that this was a reasonable plan. Then there was a discussion about having, if you had a medical concern about the vaccine or if you had a religious objection, that's, I respect those desires, but, in terms of the potential to infect someone at that facility and cause them to die, it just was not worth the risk. And so the decision was made not to, at least for the time being, not to allow anyone that's not at least had that one vaccination plus 2 weeks. And so that's, the alternative would have been to do what most other cities around us have done, is they've decided not to open their senior facility for an indeterminate amount of time. So that's how we came down on that decision. But anyway, those are my thoughts. Obviously, if council wants to have a different policy in terms of the city facilities and masks, then we'll certainly implement that. But I wanted to let you know the thought process that staff had in developing the current procedures.
Thanks. We'll do another round of comments. Councilmember Norwood.
I don't have much to add. I'm comfortable with the recommended policy. I think the city manager articulated it pretty eloquently. And, I could launch into a 5-minute discussion about that we're all adults and that if people really feel at risk, then they should not come to public settings and they should remain safe at home. But this is a public government facility, and if people want to come, they should be allowed to come. I think the measures taken at the senior center are prudent and not overly burdensome, and I realize that some may take exception to that, but we do the best we can with what the cards that we've been dealt. And our senior center is open. Our branch connection, sorry for those of you listening, is open where others are not. And so I think that we've done a pretty good job of balancing the various needs in this arena. So I stay with the recommended.
Councilmember Lynn.
Thank you, Charles. I think you summed it up pretty well. And please, I hope my fellow council members understand, I'm not recommending no masks or anything. I'm fine with the way this is. I was just stating the emails and communications that I've received from some residents. Realize that no matter what we do, some are going to be on one side of the issue and some are going to be on the other side of the issue. So I do, as Councilman Norwood said, feel as though the measures that we've taken are prudent. I have no issue with wearing a mask myself, and most of the folks that I have spoken with don't have an issue with it. They're just happy to be able to use the facility again. A lot of people have gotten shots, and I realize that, but there are still some that haven't, and I've told them they'll just have to wait. But no matter what I say, they're still going to, find fault or take objection. But I thought it was important to pass along comments that I'm hearing, because it's not about me, it's about the people that we serve. And I will be able to point them to this portion of the meeting if they have any additional questions. So thank you, Charles.
So you're in favor of keeping it as it currently is? Okay. Councilmember Rotano.
City manager, we've been talking about this, and I definitely understand and realize that it's, there are going to be people on both sides. The thing for me is that although for the most part people are still wearing masks because of the lack of requirement, it's going to deter folks from being able to go into our facility. Just like, Councilmember Norwood said, people have the right to come in our facility. You're 100% correct. They do. And I feel like by requiring everybody to wear masks, at least until we get to over a certain threshold, from a healthcare perspective, it will allow everybody to be able to come into our facility. Whereas if it's only recommended, it will deter some from being able to enter our facility. And so I still stand by, pushing for the requirement. I understand, like Councilmember said, there are gonna be folks on either side. And for me, it's about protecting everybody within our constituency, which is why I'm going to stick to that. And ultimately, I'm sure we'll have to vote on this, Mayor. I'll defer to you on that. But my sentiments have not changed on the subject.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Driscoll.
Yes. To be brief, there's no point in, beating this to death. My views haven't changed. I think our role here is to do what's best for the community. I see both sides. I understand it. I hear from both sides. But to me, this is not a popularity contest. It's a public health crisis. And over 500,000 people have died. And again, I would not be comfortable knowing that, a lot of people became ill and died at one of our facilities. I think we've been prudent, and as has been stated, I think we've been a leader, not just in the community, but in Texas, in opening our facilities, and well, it was drive-through or whatever. We had our library open last year. We had the branch connection open. City Hall's been open, etc. The rec center. So we've been a leader, and I think we have to be prudent and err on the side of medical specialists. So my view hasn't changed.
Just to confirm, you're for the required masks in city facilities for at least another few months?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so that looks like it's 2-2. Here we are. Just a few comments. I mean, I hear what everyone's saying. I do. And I hear, Charles, the challenges you and the staff may face, but I also look out here today and see every single staff member wearing a mask. And I ask myself, if the citizens don't have to wear a mask in our facilities, why are we forcing our staff to do so as well? And the issue behind that is because we want to keep you safe and protected. So I feel that standard should apply to residents coming into that facility as well, that this should be a reciprocal effort from all of us to keep every single one of us safe. And while, yes, I understand the governor opened it up, and as you noted, Councilmember Norwood, a lot of businesses are still choosing to keep this in place. And I just would rather keep an abundance of caution and say that I would like to keep the requirement that we had at least for another 3 months and evaluate it after that time, after more vaccines and other things have rolled out and we've seen how it played out. But that would be my recommendation and vote at this time. So I think that's kind of 3-2 in terms of rolling it back instead of recommended, required in city facilities as it was previously, plus the new mandates at the senior facility.
Mayor, I've captioned this for action.
Mm-hmm.
The motion would be, I would request that a vote be taken.
Okay.
And you mentioned the time frame at 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I want to be clarity on is when the governor's orders were in effect, they provide, which they're not anymore, but they did provide in a recreation center setting that if you were having strenuous activities that you were allowed to remove the mask. I think that your intent is still to allow for that. So
yeah, my intent is to go back to what we have had previously with all our facilities open, plus the new mandates that you have provided for our senior facility to be open. And I would look to do that and continue it for one more quarter. So I would make a motion basically to that effect, and would look for a second.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Driscoll. Any more discussion? Councilmember Norwood, how do you vote?
No.
Councilmember Lynn? Yes, if you want to go back to the previous requirement, so the rules that we've had in place for the last several months, or no is saying that you'd like to go to recommended, which what is currently in place for the last 5 days, 4 days. So what we just changed to. So that's a no. That would be a no.
No.
Okay. Yeah, no, I want to make sure you're voting the way you want to. Councilmember Ratana.
Yes.
Councilmember Driscoll.
Yes.
I will also vote yes. Motion carries 3-2. So, next is A5, discuss future agenda items. Councilmember Norwood.
Nothing from me, Mayor.
Councilmember Lynn.
I'm going to repeat what I had from the last meeting since we didn't get into that very much. So I had several items. One, first one was I wanted to start Farmers Branch 100, which is a birthday club for those residents in the city turning 100 years old. Second request is I'd like to get an update on streetlight replacement and conversion from mercury vapor to LEDs. Third is I'd like to get a report on outstanding code enforcement violations and where we stand with clearing citations with respect to code issues. And part of that would also include the number of violations for the recycling bins failing to be screened or being left out. And then lastly, if we could get an update on Bella Road progress.
Okay. All right, thank you. Councilmember Ratana.
None for me, sir. Thank you.
Councilmember Driscoll.
Nothing right now, thank you.
All right, thank you. I'll go ahead and read in executive session. Council may convene into a closed executive session pursuant to section 551.071 of the Texas Government Code to deliberate regarding, discuss pending litigation case number DC 21-02822, 68 Judicial Court styled Lydia Munoz versus City of Farmers Branch and Dallas County elections. Council may convene into a closed executive session pursuant to section 551.072 of the Texas Government Code to deliberate regarding, discuss the purchase, exchange, lease, or sale of real property north of Valley View, south of Bellwood, east of B Street, and west of Webb Chapel. We will recess. The time is 4:08. You voted no means you want to keep it as a recommendation. Like, we recommend you wear a mask. You don't have to. What we